Imagine paying for a first-class seat, only to be questioned, doubted, and nearly thrown off the plane, for no reason at all. But what if I told you this wasn't a mistake? What if I told you this was part of a hidden system designed to keep people like Marcus Everly out of places they rightfully belong? He thought it was just one flight attendant with a bias. But when he uncovered a secret airline policy, everything changed. By the time they landed, the entire industry was in danger of being exposed. Stay with me, because this story, it's about to take off. Before we dive in, let us know. What time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Marcus Everly adjusted the strap of his leather duffel bag as he made his way through the bustling terminal of O'Hare International Airport. The overhead speakers crackled with flight announcements, blending into the murmur of travelers rushing to their gates. He glanced at his watch. Plenty of time before boarding. It had been a long week. The Tech Investment Summit in Chicago had been productive, but exhausting. Marcus had sat through hours of negotiations, back-to-back meetings and presentations. Now all he wanted was a quiet flight home to Los Angeles. He headed toward the Atlantic Sky Airways lounge, flashing his first-class ticket at the entrance. The attendant gave him a polite but brief nod. No warm greeting, no eye contact. Marcus noticed it, but he let it slide. He had encountered this kind of cold professionalism before. He wasn't here to make small talk. Inside the lounge, the air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and leather seats. He picked a corner spot, away from the chattering businessmen and the couple arguing over a misplaced boarding pass. Marcus pulled out his phone and skimmed through his emails. Deals were moving forward, a few contracts needed his signature, and his assistant had left a reminder about an upcoming panel discussion in San Francisco. But his mind was elsewhere. Even in spaces like this, where wealth and status were supposed to equalize everything, he could still feel it. The second glances, the subtle hesitations, the quiet question in people's eyes. Do you belong here? Marcus exhaled slowly and put his phone away. He wasn't going to let paranoia ruin his evening. When his flight was called, he grabbed his bag and made his way to the gate. The first-class passengers were already lining up. An older gentleman in a navy suit chatted with the flight attendant, laughing at something she said. A woman in a pearl necklace stood next to him, adjusting the cuffs of her designer blazer. Marcus stepped into the queue. The flight attendant, a blonde woman with sharp features, gave him a quick, assessing look. "First-class boarding is for premium passengers only, sir," she said, her tone neutral but firm. Marcus kept his expression calm, though something in her words made his chest tighten. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his boarding pass, handing it to her without a word. She scanned it. A flicker of something crossed her face. Surprise, maybe? Before she forced a polite smile. "Thank you, Mr. Everly. Enjoy your flight." He nodded and stepped through. On board, the cabin had the familiar scent of clean linen and faint cologne. The seats were wide, plush, designed for comfort. Marcus found his seat, 3A, by the window. He placed his bag in the overhead compartment, then settled in, adjusting his seatbelt. A man slid into the seat beside him, middle-aged, graying at the temples, the kind of guy who looked like he played golf every weekend. He glanced at Marcus, then did a double-take, as if trying to place him. "You sure you're in the right seat, buddy?" the man asked, only half joking. Marcus turned his head slowly, meeting his gaze. "Pretty sure," he said. The man chuckled awkwardly, then busied himself with his newspaper. Marcus exhaled. He'd flown first class countless times before, but some things never changed. Just as he was about to slip on his headphones, a voice interrupted him. "Excuse me, sir." He looked up. The same flight attendant from earlier. Her name tag read Lisa Conway, stood by his seat, holding a tablet in her hands. "Can I see your boarding pass again?" she asked. A murmur ran through the cabin. People were watching now. Marcus felt the tension settle in his shoulders. "I already showed it at the gate," he said, keeping his voice even. "I just need to verify something," Lisa insisted. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and handed it over. She scanned it again, pressing her lips together as she read the details. After a moment, she looked up. "I need to check with the ground staff," she said. "Please wait here." Marcus watched her walk away, the familiar weight of suspicion settling over him. It was happening again. This wasn't about a mistake. This wasn't about protocol. This was about something else entirely. And as the whispers around him grew louder, Marcus knew. This flight wasn't going to be as simple as he had hoped. Marcus leaned back in his seat, eyes fixed on the seatbelt sign still glowing above him. He could hear the murmurs from the other passengers, soft, scattered, but unmistakable. He didn't turn his head, but he could feel their glances. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, an email from his assistant reminding him of a conference call next week. He swiped it away. His mind wasn't on business anymore. The first-class cabin hummed with quiet conversations. A man 2 rows ahead was discussing investment portfolios with his seatmate. Across the aisle, a woman was showing vacation photos to her husband. None of them were being questioned, but Marcus was. Lisa Conway reappeared, tablet still in hand. Behind her, a uniformed security officer followed, his expression unreadable. Marcus had seen this script before. "Mr. Everly," Lisa said, voice clipped. "There seems to be a discrepancy with your booking." The murmurs stopped. An uncomfortable silence settled in the cabin. Marcus kept his voice steady. "What kind of discrepancy?" Lisa shifted on her feet. "There may have been a mistake with your upgrade status. We need to verify if your seat assignment is valid." His jaw tightened. "I bought this ticket a month ago. First class, full fare. No upgrade, no mistake." She hesitated just for a second. Then, "I still need to check with the ground team." Marcus exhaled through his nose, keeping his composure. He had choices here. He could let this play out, comply, let them fumble through their so-called verification process, or he could call it what it was. He glanced at the security officer, who hadn't spoken a word. "Tell me something," Marcus said, shifting in his seat. "Are you checking anyone else's ticket?" Lisa's posture stiffened. "Sir, this is a routine procedure." "Routine for who?" Marcus asked. "Anyone else here been asked to prove they belong in this section?" A few passengers averted their eyes. Others stayed frozen, pretending not to hear. Lisa's smile faltered. "I'm just following protocol." There it was. Marcus tapped his fingers on the armrest. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was speaking for every time this had happened before. "I'll tell you what," he said, voice calm but firm. "If you want to check my ticket again, go ahead. But if you're doing this just because I don't look like I belong here, then you should think twice." A flicker of something crossed Lisa's face. Frustration, maybe, or something closer to embarrassment. But she didn't back down. Instead, she turned to the security officer. "Escort Mr. Everly off the plane while we confirm his booking." The silence in the cabin turned heavy. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. He wasn't going to let them push him out of his seat, out of his rights. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and hit record. "Let's make sure we get this on camera," he said, his voice steady. Lisa's expression tightened. The security officer hesitated. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. A woman's voice cut through the silence. "I'd like to know why he's being removed." Marcus turned. A woman in her mid-50s, dressed in a tailored suit, stood up a few rows behind him. She looked straight at Lisa. Lisa blinked. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am." The woman's eyes narrowed. "I'm Evelyn Monroe, Director of Corporate Affairs for Atlantic Sky Airways. And I'd say this concerns me very much." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Lisa opened her mouth, but no words came out. Marcus held her gaze, waiting. He wasn't going anywhere. Not this time. The tension in the first-class cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Passengers sat frozen, eyes darting between Marcus, the security officer, and Evelyn Monroe. Lisa Conway's expression flickered between frustration and uncertainty. She hadn't expected to be challenged, especially not by someone within her own airline. Evelyn took a step forward, her polished heels clicking against the plush carpet. "I assume you have a legitimate reason for asking Mr. Everly to leave his seat?" Her voice was calm, controlled, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Lisa hesitated. "We're just verifying his booking, ma'am. It's routine." Evelyn's eyes didn't waver. "Routine, you say? I've flown with this airline for 20 years, and I've never seen a first-class passenger asked to prove their seat, especially after already being scanned at the gate. Lisa's jaw clenched. We have security protocols. Evelyn cut her off. Is anyone else being asked to leave? Silence. Marcus remained seated, watching Lisa with quiet intensity. He had no intention of making this easy for her. The security officer, who had been quiet until now, shifted uncomfortably. He cleared his throat. Ma'am, we were just called to assist. I don't believe there's an actual issue with his booking. Marcus turned toward him. Then why are you here? The officer hesitated, looking at Lisa for direction. Lisa swallowed hard, her professional mask slipping. The whispers in the cabin grew louder. Evelyn folded her arms. If Mr. Everly's booking is legitimate and there's no security risk, then I suggest we all take our seats so this flight can depart on time. A beat passed. Lisa glanced around, as if searching for someone to back her up. But no one spoke. Even the man sitting next to Marcus, who had made the offhanded remark about his seat earlier, kept his eyes fixed on his newspaper. Lisa finally exhaled, forcing a tight-lipped smile. Of course, Ms. Monroe. She turned on her heel and walked briskly toward the galley, tablet clutched tightly in her hands. The security officer gave Marcus a short nod before following her. Slowly, the cabin returned to its usual murmur. Conversations restarted, flight attendants moved about, but the air still felt charged. Evelyn turned back to Marcus. I apologize for the unnecessary inconvenience. Marcus met her gaze. Unnecessary is one way to put it. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Enjoy your flight, Mr. Everly. With that, she returned to her seat. But Marcus didn't relax. Not yet, because he knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Marcus adjusted in his seat, but the weight of the moment hadn't lifted. Around him, the cabin buzzed with forced normalcy. Passengers murmuring in hushed tones, the rustling of newspapers, the clinking of glasses as a flight attendant refilled champagne. But everything felt different. Lisa Conway had disappeared into the galley, but Marcus could still feel the residue of her presence. He could still hear the way she had hesitated, scrambling for an excuse, knowing deep down that there hadn't been one. The man in seat 3B, the one who had questioned Marcus when he first sat down, shifted awkwardly beside him. His newspaper remained open, but his eyes weren't moving across the words. Finally, he cleared his throat. Didn't mean anything by it earlier, he muttered, still not looking up. Guess it's just, well, you don't see it often. Marcus turned his head slightly. See what? The man shrugged. You know, guys like you in first class. Marcus let the words settle, feeling the slow burn creep into his chest. He could have responded with something sharp, something cutting, but instead he just exhaled through his nose and turned back toward the window. Because what was the point? The truth was, the man probably thought he was being honest. Not cruel, not insulting, just stating a fact, his fact. The one built from years of seeing only a certain type of person in spaces like this. And Marcus, he was tired of carrying the burden of always being the one to prove otherwise. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Everly, can I offer you something to drink? Marcus looked up. Another flight attendant, a younger woman with auburn hair, stood beside him, a practiced smile in place. He noticed she wasn't holding the drink menu the way she had when she approached the other passengers. She had already assumed his order would be simple, expected. A bourbon, he said. Neat. She blinked, hesitated for half a second, then recovered. Of course. Marcus leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. The hum of the engines, the murmur of conversation, the sterile scent of the cabin air, it all felt suffocating in a way he hadn't expected. This was supposed to be his space too. He had earned his seat just like everyone else. And yet, the moment he stepped into this cabin, it had been made clear. He was an outsider. A few rows ahead, Evelyn Monroe was watching him, not in a scrutinizing way, but with the measured gaze of someone who had seen this before, someone who recognized the weight of it. When their eyes met, she gave him a small nod, almost imperceptible, but heavy with meaning. Marcus inhaled deeply and let it out slow. This wasn't over, not because of Lisa, not because of the passengers, but because deep down he knew. He wasn't the first person this had happened to, and he sure as hell wouldn't be the last. Marcus swirled the bourbon in his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the cabin lights. The flight had settled into its routine, passengers reclining, screens flickering with in-flight entertainment, the faint clatter of utensils as dinner service began. But beneath the polished surface of first-class luxury, the tension still simmered. Lisa Conway hadn't returned. He hadn't expected her to, not after being called out by Evelyn Monroe in front of an entire cabin. But Marcus knew better than to think it was over. A soft chime rang overhead, and a moment later, a different flight attendant approached his seat. "Mr. Everly, the captain would like a word with you," she said, her tone carefully neutral. Marcus lifted an eyebrow. "That's new." The attendant forced a polite smile. "If you'd follow me to the galley, sir." Marcus sighed, setting his drink down before unbuckling his seatbelt. As he stood, he could feel the weight of a few glances in his direction. Not as many as before, but enough. Evelyn Monroe was watching again, too. As Marcus followed the flight attendant toward the front of the plane, the air in the galley was noticeably colder, figuratively and literally. The hum of machinery, the faint scent of reheated meals, the sterile brightness of fluorescent lighting, it all felt detached from the warm elegance of the cabin. Lisa was there. So was the security officer from earlier, Derek Hensley, and in the middle of them stood Captain Alan Briggs. Middle-aged, tall and broad-shouldered, the captain exuded quiet authority. His uniform was crisp, his expression unreadable. But his posture told Marcus everything. This wasn't a friendly chat. Marcus folded his arms. "Captain, I assume this isn't about turbulence." Briggs exhaled, rubbing a hand along his jaw. "Mr. Everly, I was made aware of the situation earlier." Marcus nodded toward Lisa. "Situation or mistake?" Lisa flinched slightly. Derek Hensley kept his face impassive. Briggs cleared his throat. "Listen, I want this flight to be smooth for everyone. We're well past takeoff, but I need to make sure there are no lingering issues." Marcus let the words settle. He wasn't naive. He knew what this was. The airline wanted to contain the damage before it got worse. He tilted his head slightly. "And by issues, you mean me?" Briggs hesitated just for a fraction of a second. Then, "I'd like to ensure that all passengers feel comfortable, including yourself." Marcus scoffed lightly. "Comfortable? You want me to feel comfortable? Because from where I'm standing, I was the one questioned, I was the one asked to leave my seat, and I was the one who had to pull out my phone just to get people to take me seriously." Briggs shifted his stance. "I understand your frustration." "No," Marcus interrupted. "You really don't." Silence. Lisa's gaze was locked on the floor, her arms crossed tight. Derek Hensley still hadn't said a word. Marcus exhaled, shaking his head. "What do you want from me, Captain? You want me to accept an apology that no one's actually saying?" Briggs squared his shoulders. "I want to resolve this in a way that doesn't escalate things further." Marcus let out a dry laugh. "Ah, there it is. This wasn't about fairness. It was about containment." Lisa suddenly spoke, her voice quieter than before. "I was just following protocol." Marcus turned toward her, his gaze sharp. "What protocol? The one where I'm the only passenger you questioned? The one where my first-class ticket magically became suspicious the second I sat down?" Lisa's jaw clenched, but she didn't respond. Briggs sighed. "Look, Mr. Everly, I want to assure you that we take these concerns seriously. We'll be filing a report on this incident, and I'll personally make sure it reaches the right people." Marcus studied him. He believed Briggs meant what he was saying, but that didn't mean it would actually change anything. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. Then I'll be filing my own report, too." Briggs looked slightly caught off guard. "Of course. You have that right." Marcus turned, ready to head back to his seat, but then he paused. He looked at Lisa. "You ever ask yourself why you assumed I didn't belong?" Lisa blinked, her posture tightening. "That's not—" But Marcus didn't wait for her to finish. He walked back to his seat, the unspoken weight of the encounter pressing into his spine. He didn't need an answer, because deep down Lisa already knew. Marcus settled back into his seat, but his mind was still in the galley. The conversation with Captain Briggs, Lisa Conway, and the silent security officer left an aftertaste of something bitter. Not surprise. He'd stopped being surprised by these moments a long time ago. But exhaustion. He stared out the window. The vast darkness stretched endlessly outside, interrupted only by the occasional flash of a blinking wing light. Somewhere down there, thousands of feet below, life moved on. People went to work, ate dinner, kissed their kids goodnight. Meanwhile, up here, Marcus was still defending the simple fact that he belonged in a seat he had paid for. The absurdity of it made him shake his head. A rustle of movement beside him. The man in 3B, Marcus still hadn't caught his name, shifted uncomfortably. He had barely spoken since the ordeal began, but now he let out a quiet sigh. "Look," he muttered, still staring at his newspaper. "I just want to say, I didn't mean anything earlier about the seat thing." Marcus glanced sideways at him. "Okay." The man nodded, then hesitated. "It's just, I guess people don't expect it, you know? First class." He chuckled awkwardly. "I mean, I know that sounds bad, but it does." The man exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, I figured." For a second, Marcus considered letting the conversation die there. He didn't owe this man anything. Not an explanation. Not patience. Not a softened response to make him feel better about his own biases. But then again, silence never changed anything. So Marcus leaned slightly toward him. "Let me ask you something. How many people have you seen get on this plane tonight?" The man frowned. "What?" "Since we boarded, how many passengers have you actually looked at?" The man blinked, thrown by the question. "I don't know. A few?" Marcus nodded. "Exactly. You only noticed me because I stood out to you, and not because of my suit, or my shoes, or the way I carried myself. Just because I don't fit the picture in your head." The man opened his mouth, then closed it again. His fingers toyed with the edge of his newspaper. Marcus sighed and turned away. "Forget it." For a while, neither of them spoke. The engines hummed, the cabin lights dimmed, and the flight attendants moved quietly through the aisles, preparing for meal service. Then finally the man murmured, "Yeah, I guess you're right." Marcus didn't respond. He just let the moment settle. Because for once, someone else was the one sitting with discomfort. Further down the cabin, Evelyn Monroe observed the exchange with quiet interest. She had been watching Marcus, not out of pity, not out of curiosity, but because she had seen this play out before. Different faces, different settings. Same story. She tapped her fingers lightly against the armrest, considering her next move. Then, making a decision, she reached for her phone and sent a quick message. "We have a problem. Call me after landing." If Marcus Everly thought this was over, he was wrong, and so was Lisa Conway. The cabin had settled into its usual rhythm. Soft murmurs of conversation, the quiet hum of the engines, and the occasional clink of silverware as flight attendants served dinner. But for Marcus, the tension hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had only shifted, taking a different shape. He pushed his tray table down as the attendant placed a plate in front of him. Seared steak, roasted potatoes, some kind of delicate sauce drizzled over it. He wasn't hungry. His appetite had disappeared somewhere between the confrontation in the galley and the half-hearted attempt at an apology from his seatmate. Across the aisle, Evelyn Monroe sat with her meal untouched. Every now and then, she glanced at her phone, reading something with narrowed eyes. Marcus noticed. She was involved in this more than she let on. But before he could dwell on it, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. Lisa Conway was back. She moved through the aisle, checking on passengers, her usual flight attendant smile in place. But something was different. The way she held herself, the stiffness in her posture. It wasn't confidence anymore. It was control. Tight. Forced. When she reached Marcus's row, she hesitated for the briefest second. "Is everything satisfactory, sir?" she asked, her voice even, careful. Marcus met her gaze. "Perfect," he said flatly. Lisa gave a small nod, her grip tightening on the tray she held. "Let us know if you need anything else." Then she walked away. Marcus exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. The performance of professionalism was almost amusing. Almost. Beside him, 3B, the man who had made the offhanded comment earlier, leaned slightly toward Marcus. "She's nervous," he muttered. Marcus took a slow sip of his water. Good. The man let out a low chuckle. Can't say I blame her. That woman behind us, Monroe, she's someone important, isn't she? Marcus glanced toward Evelyn again. She was still focused on her phone, her expression unreadable. Yeah, Marcus murmured. I think she is. Meanwhile, in the galley, Lisa set down the tray she had been holding, her fingers pressing against the counter as she inhaled sharply. Derek Hensley, the security officer who had been involved earlier, stood nearby, arms crossed. This isn't going away, Lisa muttered. Derek sighed. Yeah, I figured that out when Monroe got involved. Lisa's jaw tightened. I was following protocol. Derek gave her a look. You sure about that? She glared at him. What's that supposed to mean? He shrugged, leaning against the wall. Just saying, you're looking for a way to justify it, but deep down, you know why you did what you did. Lisa's stomach twisted. She turned away, gripping the edge of the counter. Because for the first time since this whole thing started, she wasn't sure she had an answer, and that terrified her. Back in his seat, Marcus checked his phone. No service. But he didn't need to be online to know that this wasn't over. Evelyn Monroe was involved now, and if her expression was anything to go by, she knew something the rest of them didn't. He wasn't just dealing with a flight attendant's bad judgment anymore. Something bigger was at play, and whatever it was about to come to light. Marcus sat still, fingers drumming lightly against the armrest. The energy in the cabin had shifted. He could feel it. Lisa Conway had retreated to the galley, but her presence still lingered, like a stain that wouldn't quite fade. Passengers had mostly returned to their own distractions, movies, emails, drinks. But every now and then, someone stole a glance at him. Not curiosity anymore. Something else. Recognition. They had witnessed what happened. Some of them were pretending they hadn't, but they knew. Across the aisle, Evelyn Monroe had barely touched her food. She sat poised, scrolling through her phone with sharp focus. Marcus didn't know what she was reading, but he could see it in her posture. This wasn't just another flight for her either. He didn't like unfinished puzzles. And Evelyn Monroe, she was a missing piece. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. 3B turned to him, eyebrows raised. Going somewhere? Marcus gave a small smirk. Just stretching my legs. The truth was, he wasn't planning to stretch anything. He was planning to have a conversation. Evelyn Monroe didn't look up until Marcus was standing beside her row. She glanced at him, then at the empty seat across from her. Something on your mind, Mr. Everly? He nodded toward the open spot. That seat taken? She studied him for a moment, then gestured for him to sit. He settled in, resting his elbows on his knees. All right, I'll cut to it. You're not just another first-class passenger, and I don't think you stood up earlier just because you had nothing better to do. Evelyn's lips curved slightly. Observant. It's a habit. She set her phone down, folding her hands together. I wasn't planning to get involved, you know, but when I saw the way Lisa was handling it, I recognized something. Marcus tilted his head. And what's that? Evelyn exhaled, glancing briefly around the cabin before leaning in just slightly. Patterns. The word landed heavier than he expected. Marcus narrowed his eyes. Meaning? She hesitated, just for a second. Then, this isn't the first time this has happened on one of our flights. His spine stiffened. He had assumed as much. No way was this an isolated case. But hearing it confirmed sent a slow wave of heat through his chest. How many times? He asked, voice low. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she picked up her phone and tapped the screen a few times. After a moment, she turned it toward him. An email thread. Internal airline correspondence. Marcus scanned the subject line. Passenger risk review. Priority cases. His jaw clenched. Evelyn's voice was quiet but firm. Certain passengers get flagged before they ever step on the plane. And let's just say, the pattern isn't random. Marcus leaned back, letting that sink in. It wasn't just Lisa. Wasn't just an overzealous flight attendant who made a bad call. It was bigger than that. He rubbed his temple, forcing himself to stay composed. Why are you telling me this? Evelyn studied him. Because I think you're the kind of man who won't let it slide. Marcus let out a breath, slow and measured. She wasn't wrong, but now, knowing what he knew, he also understood something else. This wasn't going to stay contained to just this flight. It was about to get a lot bigger, and there was no turning back. Marcus stared at the email on Evelyn Monroe's phone, the words burning into his brain like a brand. Passenger risk review, priority cases. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't an overzealous flight attendant with a bias problem. It was policy. His pulse slowed, not in fear, but in something colder, sharper. He had spent a lifetime knowing that spaces like these weren't designed for men like him. But this was proof. Evelyn studied him, letting the weight of it sink in. Finally, Marcus exhaled through his nose, tapping a finger against his knee. How long has this been going on? Evelyn hesitated, then swiped to another screen on her phone. A list of internal reports, stretching back years. As far as I can tell, at least a decade, maybe longer. Marcus's jaw tightened. And no one's done anything? Her smile was thin, humorless. You think the people running this company don't know? They built it this way. Marcus ran a hand over his face. He had expected corruption, bias. But this level, the kind that operated in plain sight, woven so deeply into corporate structure that it was treated as standard protocol, made his stomach turn. A slow, familiar anger began to settle in. Not the kind that burned fast and reckless, but the kind that sat in your chest, steady and unshakable. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Marcus, this flight, it's not an accident. They knew who you were before you even got to the airport. His eyes snapped to hers. What? She nodded. You're flagged. Your name is on the list. That's why Lisa targeted you so quickly. Not because she personally has it out for you, though let's be honest, she didn't hesitate, but because the system put you in front of her. Marcus sat back, his thoughts clicking into place. The hesitant glance from the lounge receptionist, the way Lisa had zeroed in on him at the gate, the fact that security had been called without any real justification. It wasn't about his seat, it was about who he was. Evelyn glanced around before locking her phone and slipping it into her blazer pocket. You have a decision to make. Marcus exhaled sharply. Which is? Her gaze was steady. You could let this go. Get off this flight, shake it off, and move on. That's what they're hoping you'll do. Marcus scoffed. Or, her expression turned serious, or you expose it. Marcus looked down at his hands. For years, he had fought battles like this in boardrooms, in negotiations, in conversations where bias was implied but never spoken aloud. But this was documented. This was undeniable. The weight of it pressed against his ribs. You knew about this before today, he said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn nodded. I suspected, but I didn't have proof until now. Marcus let out a slow breath, nodding to himself. Then he looked up, eyes sharp, voice steady. Then let's get them their proof. Because if Atlantic Sky Airways thought they could keep this buried, they had seriously underestimated him. The plane hummed with quiet luxury, but for Marcus, the cabin no longer felt like a sanctuary of comfort. It felt like a crime scene, one where the evidence had been sitting in plain sight for years, overlooked, dismissed, normalized. Evelyn watched him, waiting. He could see it in her eyes. She had been carrying this knowledge for a long time, weighing the risks, deciding if and when she should act. Now she had handed the choice to him. Marcus rubbed his temple, grounding himself. What's in those emails? Evelyn pulled out her phone again, unlocking it with a quick swipe. She scrolled for a moment before turning the screen toward him. He skimmed the messages, his chest tightening with each line. Priority screening procedures. Subject, high-risk passenger alerts. The wording was careful, corporate enough to sound neutral, vague enough to create deniability. But the pattern was undeniable. Passenger profiling based on non-standard travel behavior. Extra verification procedures for uncommon demographic placements. Security discretion encouraged in higher-risk customer interactions. Marcus clenched his jaw. It was coded language for the same thing that had happened to him. A system designed to keep first-class seats looking a certain way. To ensure people like him had to prove, again and again, that they belonged. "How many people know about this?" he asked, voice tight. Evelyn sighed. "Higher-ups, obviously. Certain security personnel. A handful of flight attendants, though most don't question it. It's framed as a precautionary measure, part of customer safety protocols." Marcus exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Safety from what? People who don't look the part?" Evelyn didn't respond. She didn't need to. He looked at the screen again, then back at her. "What happens if this gets out?" She studied him. "It won't just be an airline scandal. It'll be huge. Lawsuits, policy overhauls, maybe even a federal investigation into how racial profiling is being baked into corporate security measures." She paused. "And they won't go down without a fight?" Marcus knew what she meant. If he pushed this forward, he wouldn't just be taking on an airline. He'd be taking on a system designed to protect itself at all costs. The whispers of the past resurfaced in his mind. "You don't want to be the troublemaker, Marcus. Play the game, not against it. Pick your battles." This was the battle. His fingers curled against the armrest. "They'll try to spin it." Evelyn nodded. "They already are. Monroe isn't just my name, Marcus. It's my job. Damage control, PR, and trust me, they're preparing their counter-narrative as we speak." Marcus smirked bitterly. "Let me guess. Misunderstanding. Isolated incident. Nothing systemic." "Exactly." Marcus let out a slow breath. "What do you want from this?" Evelyn was silent for a moment. Then carefully she said, "The truth. Out in the open. No spin. No controlled narrative." Marcus met her gaze. "You willing to go down with it?" A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Maybe, if it means it stops happening." Marcus nodded slowly. Then he pulled out his phone. "No more maybe," he said. "Let's make sure it does." And with that, he pressed record. The moment Marcus pressed record, a line was crossed. There was no turning back. He held his phone steady, the red indicator blinking in the corner of the screen. Across from him, Evelyn Monroe remained composed, though the flicker of tension in her jaw told him she understood what this meant. "This is Marcus Everly," he said, voice steady but sharp. "I'm currently on board an Atlantic Sky Airways flight from Chicago to Los Angeles, where I've just been made aware of something the airline doesn't want you to know." Evelyn's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't stop him. Marcus turned the phone slightly, just enough to show the email still open on her screen. "Right here, in black and white. Internal communications proving that this airline has been profiling certain passengers under the guise of security measures. And from what I'm seeing, I'm not the first. I'm just the one who caught them in the act." He let the words settle for a moment, making sure they carried weight. Evelyn inhaled, then finally spoke. "What we're looking at isn't just one flight crew making a mistake. It's a structured process, a deliberate process, and unless someone stops it, it won't change." Marcus nodded, lowering his phone slightly. His mind was already racing ahead. This video wouldn't just be a viral clip. He wasn't interested in 15 minutes of internet outrage. He was interested in permanent change. Before he could speak again, a shadow moved at the edge of his vision. Lisa Conway. She had emerged from the galley, face pale, mouth slightly open. She had clearly heard everything. Her gaze flicked between Marcus, Evelyn, and the phone still recording in his hand. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice strained. Marcus met her stare head-on. "Telling the truth." Lisa's hands curled into fists. "You can't just—" She hesitated, lowering her voice when she realized passengers were glancing their way. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Marcus arched a brow. "Enlighten me." Lisa's throat bobbed, but she didn't say anything right away. Instead, she glanced around as if expecting someone, anyone, to step in. But no one did. Evelyn studied her carefully. "Lisa, what exactly do you think is going to happen when we land?" Lisa flinched, and Marcus saw it. The crack, the sliver of doubt. Lisa wasn't just worried about keeping her job. She was scared, which meant there was more to this. Marcus stopped recording and slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Lisa, you know something, don't you?" Lisa took a step back, shaking her head. "I shouldn't be talking to you." Marcus stood. "Then talk to someone who'll actually do something about this. Because you and I both know the people above you. They won't protect you." Lisa exhaled shakily, eyes darting toward the galley where security officer Derek Hensley had been earlier. He wasn't there now. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then so softly it was almost a whisper, she said, "Meet me after we land." And then she was gone. Marcus looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Marcus. Neither of them spoke, because they both knew, whatever Lisa had to say, it was going to blow this thing wide open. Marcus sat back in his seat, his mind whirring. The flight still had over an hour before landing in Los Angeles, but everything had already shifted. Lisa Conway had been unraveling since the moment this started. Now she was scared. Not defensive, not angry, scared. And that meant whatever she knew was bigger than just her own actions. Evelyn exhaled beside him, tapping a fingernail against the edge of her armrest. "She's cracking." Marcus nodded. "Yeah. She wouldn't have told you to meet her if she wasn't desperate," Evelyn added, lowering her voice. "Which means whatever's happening inside this airline isn't just standard bias. It's coordinated." Marcus already knew that much. The email she had shown him proved it. But Lisa's reaction confirmed something else. Someone higher up was involved. And if they were willing to go this far to protect it, they weren't going to let it fall apart without a fight. Across the aisle, a flight attendant refilled a passenger's wine glass. The hum of the engines filled the silence between them. Then Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and whatever she saw made her face tighten. Marcus arched a brow. "Something good?" She hesitated, then handed him the phone. "You tell me." He took it, scanning the message. It was a forwarded email from an anonymous source. Subject: urgent, internal inquiry underway. "Monroe, we need to discuss your involvement in the Everly situation. Corporate has been alerted, and we are moving forward with damage control. Do not engage further. Expect a call from legal upon landing." Marcus clenched his jaw. "They're trying to shut you down." Evelyn gave a humorless smile. "They're trying to protect themselves. I'm just collateral damage." Marcus shook his head, returning the phone. "They wouldn't be panicking unless they knew what's coming." Evelyn studied him. "What exactly is coming, Marcus?" He smirked, but there was no humor in it. "That depends on Lisa, doesn't it?" Evelyn exhaled, rolling her shoulders. "If she actually talks, this thing explodes. But if she backs out—" Marcus finished the thought. "Then we're right back where we started." He didn't say the rest, that letting this go had never been an option for him, and he sure as hell wasn't about to start now. At the back of the plane, Lisa stood in the galley, her hands gripping the counter. The familiar sounds of the aircraft, the beep of service buttons, the distant chatter of passengers, faded into the background. She felt sick. She had told Everly to meet her. She had opened a door she couldn't close, but she also knew the truth. And if she stayed silent, it would never stop. She took a shaky breath and pulled out her phone. Her fingers hovered over a contact. Jonathan Reeves, Corporate Affairs. Then with a flicker of determination, she scrolled past it and typed a new message. "Everly, we land in 45 minutes. Meet me near baggage claim. I'll tell you everything." Then before she could second-guess herself, she hit send, because whether she liked it or not, the truth was already in motion, and there was no stopping it now. The seatbelt sign flicked on, and the intercom crackled to life as the captain's voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent into Los Angeles. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for landing." Marcus sat motionless, his phone screen still glowing from Lisa's message. "Everly, we land in 45 minutes. Meet me near baggage claim. I'll tell you everything." Evelyn glanced at the text over his shoulder, her expression unreadable. "She's committing." Marcus locked the screen, exhaling slowly. "Yeah, but the question is, who else knows she is?" Because if Lisa had reached her breaking point, there was a good chance someone above her had sensed it too. Across the cabin, Lisa moved stiffly through the aisle, checking seat belts, offering final pre-landing smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. The mask was still on, but Marcus could see the cracks forming underneath. And then there was the real wild card, Jonathan Reeves. Evelyn's email had already warned them that corporate knew about the situation, and if Lisa was about to go rogue and confirm what they had both suspected, there was no telling what Reeves or anyone else in his department would do to contain the fallout. The plane shuddered slightly as it began its final approach, and Marcus felt a shift inside him, an unshakable certainty that things weren't going to stay contained much longer. Evelyn straightened in her seat. "Security is going to be watching when we land." Marcus nodded. "So we move smart." His fingers tapped against the armrest, running through every possible scenario. Lisa could talk, or she could disappear. They could get proof, or she could get scared. Either way, Atlantic Sky Airways was already laying the groundwork for damage control. As the ground came into view through the window, Marcus set his jaw. Let them try. This wasn't their story to control anymore. The landing was smooth, but the moment the wheels hit the runway, Marcus could already feel the shift in energy. People checked their phones, fastened bags, prepared for the rush to disembark. But Marcus, he was watching the movement. Lisa was gone, disappeared toward the front of the cabin before the plane had even taxied to a stop. Derek Hensley, the security officer, had also moved. His stance near the cockpit was too strategic to be a coincidence. Evelyn unclipped her belt. "This feels off." Marcus gave a slow nod. "Yeah, let's move fast." As soon as the doors opened, the usual chaos of disembarkation took over. First-class passengers stood, stretching, pulling down bags, ready to exit. Marcus and Evelyn didn't rush, but they didn't linger either. They stepped into the jet bridge without hesitation, eyes scanning for Lisa. She wasn't there. Evelyn muttered a curse under her breath. If she panicked, she won't. But even as he said it, Marcus wasn't sure. They stepped into the terminal, the fluorescent glow of LAX washing over them. The usual scene of weary travelers, family reunions, and business commuters unfolded around them. And then Marcus saw her. Lisa stood near baggage claim, clutching her phone. Her foot tapped anxiously against the tile, and she looked ready to bolt. But the moment she spotted him, her expression changed, determined. She took a step forward, then stopped cold. Because standing not 10 feet away, watching her closely, was a man in a dark suit. Jonathan Reeves. Marcus swore under his breath. Evelyn's voice was tight. "They're already here." Lisa's face went pale. Marcus clenched his fists. They weren't going to let her talk, but he wasn't going to let them stop her. Not now. Not after everything. For a split second, the world around Marcus seemed to slow. The background noise of LAX, the baggage claim carousel whirring, the murmur of travelers, the overhead announcements faded into nothing but the standoff unfolding in front of him. Lisa stood frozen, caught between two choices. Her eyes darted between Marcus and Jonathan Reeves, who stood cool and composed, his sharp suit and practiced demeanor making it painfully obvious that he wasn't just here to chat. Evelyn muttered under her breath, "They got to her first." Marcus inhaled slowly, steadying himself. "Not necessarily." Lisa swallowed hard. Her fingers twitched around her phone, gripping it like a lifeline. Marcus took a calculated step forward, closing the distance between them. Reeves noticed, his expression barely shifting. But Marcus saw the subtle way his jaw tightened. He wasn't here by accident. He wasn't here alone. Lisa's voice came out shakier than she probably intended. I can't talk here." Reeves smiled, all corporate charm and thinly veiled authority. "Ms. Conway, let's not make any rash decisions. I'd hate for this to get complicated." Marcus's stomach tightened. That wasn't a request. That was a warning. Lisa took a step backward. Reeves's eyes darkened. "Lisa," Marcus seized the moment. "Lisa," he said, voice firm but even. "If you don't talk now, you never will." She hesitated. Her breathing was uneven. Evelyn took a step forward, her presence solid beside Marcus. "They'll bury this, and they'll bury you with it." Reeves' smile barely faltered, but Marcus saw the muscle tick in his jaw. Lisa blinked rapidly, as if trying to clear the fog in her head. Her gaze flickered back to Reeves. She swallowed hard. "I need to—" Then something shifted in her eyes. Resolve. Lisa took a deep breath and lifted her phone. "This entire system is rigged," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough for others to hear. "Atlantic Sky Airways has been racially profiling passengers for years, and I have the proof." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Reeves stilled. His mask didn't crack, but his posture did. A few heads turned. People were listening now. Marcus watched as the tension twisted tighter and tighter, until finally Reeves exhaled through his nose, smoothing his tie as if none of this had rattled him. "Ms. Conway," he said smoothly, "I strongly advise you to think carefully about what you say next." Lisa let out a shaky laugh, not from amusement, but from the sheer weight of what she had just done. "No," she said, "for the first time in my career, I think I'm finally thinking clearly." And with that, she hit send. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't have to check to know what it was. The evidence was out. Lisa had just burned the entire system to the ground, and there was nothing Jonathan Reeves could do to stop it. The moment Lisa hit send, the ground beneath them seemed to shift. Not physically, but in the way that power changes hands. Sudden, irreversible, and impossible to ignore. Jonathan Reeves's expression barely flickered, but Marcus saw it, the tightening of his jaw, the flicker of panic behind his carefully controlled features. He knew. It was too late. Lisa's breath was shaky, her hands trembling at her sides, but her eyes were locked onto Reeves. She had spent years in this system, following its rules, upholding its unspoken policies, and in a single decision, she had flipped the script. The notification pinged again on Marcus's phone, forwarded to press. He exhaled sharply. It was done. Evelyn stepped beside him, her presence solid and steady. She glanced toward Lisa. "That file, it went to the media?" Lisa swallowed hard but nodded. "Every major outlet I could think of." A shift in the air. A few passengers nearby had noticed the tension. Some had stopped to watch. Their curiosity piqued. The baggage claim area was no longer just a mundane stop before heading home. It was a battleground. Reeves adjusted his tie, regaining his composure. Then, in that signature corporate tone, he said, "Ms. Conway, I hope you understand what you've just done." Lisa's jaw clenched. "Yeah, I do." Reeves nodded, exhaling through his nose. "Then you also understand that this won't go the way you think it will." Marcus scoffed. "You're still talking like you have control over this." Reeves turned his sharp gaze on him. "Do you really think Atlantic Sky Airways is just going to roll over? That we'll just, what, accept this and move on?" Marcus took a step forward, lowering his voice just enough to be dangerous. "It doesn't matter what you do next. This isn't your narrative anymore." Evelyn crossed her arms. "Your best move would be damage control, admit fault, reform, but I have a feeling you're not going to do that, are you?" Reeves didn't respond immediately. He studied Evelyn for a long moment, then turned to Lisa. "Ms. Conway, if you'd like legal representation, the company can—" Lisa shook her head. "I'm done being part of this." She glanced at Marcus. "I want to go public." Reeves exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders as if releasing tension. Then, with an air of calculated resignation, he straightened his cuffs and nodded. "Then good luck," he said, "because you're going to need it." And with that, he turned and walked away. Not defeated, not yet. Because Atlantic Sky Airways wasn't finished fighting, but neither were they. Marcus felt the shift happening in real time. Lisa's hands were still shaking, but something in her eyes had changed. Evelyn tapped her phone, scanning news updates. "It's moving fast," she muttered. "Press is already asking questions. This story's about to explode." Marcus ran a hand over his face, grounding himself. "Then we need to make sure it keeps growing." Lisa swallowed. "What do we do now?" Marcus met her gaze. "We don't let them rewrite this." Because the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Marcus stood in the middle of the LAX baggage claim, surrounded by the hum of conversations, the rolling of luggage wheels, and the scattered clicks of phone cameras. But none of it mattered, because right now the only thing that mattered was what happened next. Lisa was still pale, her breath uneven, but she had done it. She had sent the files. She had stepped into the unknown. Evelyn scrolled through her phone, reading headlines aloud. "Atlantic Sky Airways accused of racial profiling passengers. Leaked emails suggest systemic discrimination in airline industry." It was everywhere. Marcus exhaled, shoulders tightening. "They're going to come after us." Evelyn gave a small nod. "Oh, without a doubt." Lisa's voice was quiet. "What do I do?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. She had been part of the system, a willing participant until now, until she had seen what was beneath the polished surface and chose to destroy it instead of protecting it. "You stand by what you did," he said, "and you don't back down." Lisa swallowed, then nodded. A commotion at the far end of the terminal caught his attention. A group of reporters had arrived, microphones out, cameras rolling. Marcus knew they weren't here by coincidence. Evelyn smirked. "Looks like your video did its job." Marcus gave a small chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "Yeah, now let's make sure we do ours." He took a slow breath, rolling his shoulders before stepping toward the press. Lisa hesitated for a second, then fell into step beside him. Evelyn followed, her presence a steady force. A reporter stepped forward, microphone raised. "Mr. Everly, do you believe this case will lead to legal action against Atlantic Sky Airways?" Marcus met her gaze, his voice clear, firm. "This isn't just about one airline," he said. "It's about an entire industry that has allowed discrimination to operate under the guise of security and policy. This isn't a mistake. This is a system, and it needs to be dismantled." More voices, more cameras. The beginning of something much bigger than this flight. Lisa's shoulders straightened beside him. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. Evelyn smirked. "Buckle up," she muttered. "This ride's about to get bumpy." Marcus smiled. He had spent years watching, waiting, calculating which battles were worth the fight. But this was war, and he was ready to win. And so Marcus Everly didn't just fight for himself. He fought for change. Because the truth is, discrimination doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in policy, in unspoken rules, in systems designed to keep people out without ever saying it aloud. But here's the thing. Systems only stay in place when people stay silent. Marcus refused to be silent. Lisa Conway made a choice. Evelyn Monroe took a stand. And because of them, the story didn't end with one flight. It sparked a movement. Now let me ask you, have you ever witnessed something unfair and stayed quiet? What would you do if you had proof of a system built to exclude? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories that challenge power, expose injustice, and inspire change, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because trust me, there's more to come.